Hey guys, I wanted to make a video just listing off the top 10 games that I feel defined my childhood. Now to be clear, these are games that I played from the years 1985 all the way to 1999, so let's get right into it. When I was a kid, I had a friend who was exactly like Eric Cartman. I'm serious, he looked like Cartman, he talked like Cartman, he acted like Cartman, he was spoiled like Cartman. And to top it off, his name was actually Eric. Anyways, Eric pretty much got whatever he wanted. He had every game console a kid could want, and most of them I'd never even heard of before. I mean, I was 5 years old. It was the first time I heard of TurboGrafx, and the game was Splatterhouse. Splatterhouse was violent, gory, disgusting, and graphic. So, in other words, it was the type of game every 5-year-old at the time wanted to play, and it was the type of game every parent didn't want their 5-year-old to play. You could use your fists or find other weapons like a 2x4, a wrench, shotgun, and a rock, as you killed your way through monsters, demons, ghosts, evil fetuses, and this guy with a bag over his head and chainsaws for hands. The game spawned a few sequels and even a remake in 2010, although it wasn't very well received critically. Double Dragon is another game that I didn't own as a kid, but all of my spoiled friends did. It was among my favorite beat-em-up games that I played growing up, along with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time, and the Simpsons arcade game, but Double Dragon was the one that I played the most. It made appearances on a slew of different platforms, and its popularity even helped spawn a terrible movie adaptation, which a lot of you have been asking me to review. And I just might. I remember being a kid and going to a restaurant that my family used to frequent, and whenever we had to wait for a table, there was a Pac-Man arcade in the waiting area. I played the game on so many different platforms that I can't even remember them all. What more can be said about Pac-Man? It's one of the most influential games ever made, it sported the first gaming mascot, and became one of the highest grossing video games of all time. And if you're curious to see some of its influence on the gaming industry, just check out the next entry on this list. Now, I was tempted to put Dark Forces in this spot on the list because of how many hours I put into that game, but I gotta admit it was Wolfenstein that started my love for first-person maze shooters. Even before Doom, I plugged hours into Wolfenstein, and I don't think I'll ever forget the boss fight with Hitler. The game was very successful, but also became subject to a lot of controversy due to the use of Nazi symbolism, and was actually banned from sale in Germany. Duck Hunt was the first game I ever played. Playing this game is actually one of my earliest memories. I think I must have been 4 or 5 years old. In fact, when I played the game for the first time, I didn't know what to do. I vividly remember trying to shoot the dog as soon as he came on screen. Of course, as a kid, I found the best way to play the game was just to press the barrel of the gun right up against the screen. I also had no idea what the clay shooting was. For years, I thought they were just UFOs, and now that I think about it, shooting alien spacecraft in the desert is much more interesting than shooting plates of clay. I also have to say that I think the technology of the Zapper is pretty impressive for the 80s. It was really cool when I was a kid. That is, of course, until Nintendo came out with the Super Scope for Super Nintendo. Number 5 on this list is Kirby's Dream Land for the original Game Boy. I remember getting this game as a kid and playing it non-stop. Every year for March break, my family would drive down to Florida, and my Game Boy would prove to be my main source of entertainment during those long drives. I loved all of Kirby's games, from Kirby's Adventure on NES to other Game Boy titles like Kirby's Dream Land 2 and Kirby's Pinball Land. I always thought Kirby was a really cool character, and the ability to copy the traits of his enemies added some real variety to the gameplay in later titles. The first game that I had for my original Game Boy was Tetris. At first, I really didn't enjoy the game that much, but I eventually grew to love it. In fact, I still play Tetris today. It's a great game that can prove to be very challenging as the difficulty increases. Who knew that a game about stacking blocks in different patterns would go on to be reproduced in so many different variations throughout the gaming generations? I enjoyed quite a few fighting game franchises when I was growing up, but Mortal Kombat was by far my favorite and still is. I loved Mortal Kombat so much that my mom even made me a Scorpion costume for Halloween when I was 9. Of course, when the game was first released, it caused its fair share of controversy because of the amount of bloody and graphic violence in the game, so much so that the ERSB was founded shortly after, and Nintendo even censored the blood in the Super Nintendo version of the game. In the Sega Genesis version of the game, you can clearly see the blood while fighting, but in the Nintendo version, the blood was replaced with sweat. The Mortal Kombat franchise might have had a few ups and downs over the years, but overall, I love the characters, the environments, the special moves, and of course, the fatalities. I honestly don't think there is one single game I've spent more time playing than GoldenEye for the Nintendo 64. When this game was released, I was a huge fan of James Bond movies, which only fed into my addiction for this game. Even after I had beaten the game, I replayed it countless times on the different difficulties and trying to beat each level as fast as I could to unlock all of the cheats and extra levels. Aside from the single player, there is, of course, the multiplayer. GoldenEye multiplayer was some of the most fun I've had playing offline multiplayer in gaming, period. As long as none of my friends picked Oddjob, because that's just bullshit. GoldenEye was my favorite game on the N64 and one of the best games ever made. It was an easy entry on this list, but as much as I loved it, there was one more other game franchise that defined gaming in my childhood even more. I'm willing to bet that most of you could have guessed this even before you clicked on the video, but it's true. The Super Mario Bros. Franchise easily defined gaming in my childhood. And this includes pretty much most of the franchise from the 80s and 90s. We're talking Super Mario Bros. 1, 2, 3, and of course, Super Mario 64. I can remember being around 5 years old. I was in the hospital for an operation, and during my recovery, my parents took me to the games room in the hospital. There was an NES and Super Mario Brothers, and I remember spending the whole time in there playing it. I didn't care what other types of board games or toys were in that room, and when it was finally time to go back to my hospital room, I remember my parents having to pry the controller out of my hands. After that, I got the game system for Christmas, and I played that thing all of the time. And I'll never forget the moment when I saw Super Mario 64 for the first time. I was in a Walmart and saw a crowd of kids around one of those demo consoles they had set up. I remember peeking through the crowd, seeing Mario in 3D on the screen, and I think part of my brain exploded. Not only were these games super fun and addicting, but Super Mario Bros. Helped pull the gaming industry out of the video game crash of the early 80s. Everyone knows how iconic Mario is and the impact of these games have had on the industry, so I don't even need to explain. My earliest and most vivid memories of gaming will forever be synonymous with Mario, and that's why it was easy to put this on top of the list. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the list, and please post your own list in the comment section below. Please subscribe to Fanboy Arcade, and I'll see you guys next time.